Hello, welcome to the Gregg Museum. I'm Zoe Starling, and this is Christina Marshington. We're with the Education Department here at the Gregg, and we want to welcome you to Thoughts from an Artist, Part 1 with Daniel Johnston. 1,000 Throws is up at the Gregg Museum at the moment. So Daniel, I've always been interested in understanding the installation process. Could you tell us a little bit about where you started as an artist with the initial idea, and then how that changed as you actually got into the space?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the installation process, I guess there's two questions there. The installation process as like my career is how I started doing installations is an interesting starting point, because I started a project where I made 100 jars, 100 large pots, and the idea of the project was for me to sort of see the evolution of these jars from the first one to 100. And so I thought I would make these 100 jars and then line them up down this gravel road that I live on, and I would see this sort of beautiful evolution. What happened is, when I lined the pots up, then I realized that like, evolution isn't a consistent sort of thing that happens, and the pots really had a much greater impact than what I realized. And so when I saw this, then I recognized them as an installation rather than sort of a group of individual pots. So that started me on working with installations. And at that point, I was really spending a lot of time building environments for the work to set in. And with the sort of focus being on the large jars, but just changing the way you were in the space with these large pots, so you would sort of see them differently. And I think the shift with this installation is that I really sort of thought about the space itself more than I thought about the pots that were going to go into the space. And it's a real transitional piece for me, because it's really moving more into architecture than ceramics, and it really leaves a lot behind that I've done before, which is really scary. So, and that could have happened if Roger and everyone here at the Gregg didn't allow me the space, literally the space, but also the time space and the freedom and the confidence in me to come in and build an installation, because I live 2 hours away, and I would come in to look at the space, but of course with COVID, then everything sort of started getting very tight with how much time we could spend in the building. And so then I would go home, and I'm working in a log cabin that's really much smaller than this space. And you do these drawings, and for some reason you can't. The more drawings you do, the more you lose the sense of this space. And so I would come back over, and I would throw all those drawings out and start all over again. It just happened over and over and over. And I lost perspective a lot in building this. And I think it's because it's such a beautiful space. It's also one of the first spaces that I've been infatuated with the architect who built the space itself, and the sort of outside space as well as the inside space of the place that I have to change. And in my mind, there's great connections there. And I just do the work. All these kind of things come to my mind, and I just do the work. So I don't know what that says about installation or how that has to do with like Robert Smithson or any of those guys. I don't know, and it doesn't matter to me. But it's only like to recognize that lately, especially, that part of the challenge was the respect for the architecture, what it began as. I found this material at the scrapyard, and it's really beautiful, just rusted iron, and I realized that I built the house transparent. You could still see the object, but then you could still see the room. And so it was really the perfect thing for in here. It really worked out well because it allowed you to realize the beauty of this room itself, and this piece works really beautifully with it. Also, if you look at the siding on the outside of this building, it's a beautiful kind of way in which they created structure in this very kind of just rectangular box. And, you know, this reminds me of it to some extent, the way the structure of the metal sheeting is. I never really meant to make a house that was so obviously straightforward a house, but it being transparent I really loved. And these houses that are built this way, the beauty of them is they're already deconstructed to the most simple, basic thing. So there's nothing I can do to deconstruct them anymore except make them transparent so you can actually see the whole space. And I remember seeing blueprints very early on whenever like CAD programs started being developed and they stopped using the drafting tables, and they had these like very generic patterns that would represent each sort of material. And I really love how this house, it does that. Like almost every material is a different sort of transparent pattern. And so I like this kind of idea that it's this, like, from my time period in the 80s of kind of growing up in the 80s of seeing this three-dimensional kind of CAD drawing. But I think to get to a more powerful place emotionally for me is probably I think I originally wanted to build a sort of cathedral in this space. Was my original idea. And when it's all said and done, this is like what I think of as a cathedral for me. It's these very simple houses, and you know they represent home.
One thing that really struck me when I first saw your installation was how the light casts shadows on the wall. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really beautiful that that's what ended up happening, is that the sort of interaction with the walls just became shadows. And it's something that I've worked with on a lot of the other installations are shadows, a lot of shadows, and the lighting situation is really brilliant here. So I've been able to really take advantage of it. And I do really like the shadows. And in a way, it's a transparent structure, but the shadows are a lot more interesting than if it was solid, you know. I think I've been into a lot of these houses, because if I find them, I like to go into them, you know. And just looking at the shadows in here, you know, I think you can go into one of the old kitchens, and it's like it doesn't really register, even if there's countertops. It doesn't really hit you unless there's just a table that's completely empty, you know. And then you just like you just the volume of people that sit at the table, the volume of meals, and the sort of probably the fights and the arguments, and then probably all the like really loving times, and it's just like this like centerpiece of like all of this stuff that happens, you know. And it's interesting how that one object in that whole house can just make you feel all of that, you know. And I really think that I don't want to tell people what to feel, but I think for me, you know, I like that essence of putting ourselves in perspective. And I think it does that thing to where if you look at the past very thoughtfully, it only leads you to like one place, and that's like the future, you know? And it puts yourself right in this middle place. And And then I think that overwhelming sense of emotion that you get, I think it comes from like you actually are experiencing this present moment, and it's very bizarre and it's very fleeting. You know, it just happens very quickly. But and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Like you can't do a damn thing about the future in a way, and you can't do anything about the past, and you just find yourself in this like weird little place.
Was the hallway always part of the original plans for your installation?
Once I had the house in place, then I again went back to the drawing board and had a lot of ideas for this backspace, but none of them really worked. They worked on paper, but once I came back over and saw the space again, you know, I just like knew there was no need to even start building it because it just wasn't going to work. So I actually just built these walls just on a whim. I just put them up because I just felt what the space really needed.